My father abandoned me and replaced me with his stepdaughters, paid $80K for their college but nothing for me. When I got married, I made a decision he never saw coming, and finally found my peace. I'm 27 years old, I work in digital marketing, and about 6 months ago I married the love of my life in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by people who really love me. My father wasn't there, and honestly, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made, even though it sounds terrible to say it like that. But for you to understand why, I need to tell you this whole story from the beginning, because it's long and complicated and there are still days when I question whether I did the right thing, you know? Whether I was too harsh or whether I should have given him one more chance. My name is Melissa. Though in some places I still show up as Emily because I never liked my birth name, and I changed it legally when I turned 18. But that's another story. I have a sister, Lauren, who's 2 years younger than me, and we basically grew up as a team of two against the world. Our father, Michael, was never exactly what you'd call a loving dad. For as long as I can remember, he was always distant, critical, like our existence was a burden to him. I remember when I was like 8 years old, I came home from school super excited because I'd gotten the best grade on a math test. And when I told him, he just looked up from the newspaper for 2 seconds and said something like, "Good, I guess," and went back to reading. Lauren and I always joked. Well, not so much joked, but it was our way of surviving, that we were invisible to him. We could be in the same room, and it was like we didn't exist. My mom, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. She worked full-time as a nurse but always found time for us, to go to our school events, help us with homework, listen to us talk about our teenage problems. Looking back, I think she compensated for my father's emotional absence, if that makes sense. She gave us double the love, so we wouldn't feel the void he left as much. But even so, when you're a kid, you want your father to see you, you want him to be proud of you, you want to feel like you all matter to him. And we never had that. And my parents got divorced when I was 15 and Lauren was 13. Honestly, it was more of a relief than anything else. No more walking on eggshells around the house trying not to bother my father. No more listening to the nighttime fights they pretended we couldn't hear. No more of that constant tension in the air. I remember when my mom sat us down to tell us they were separating, Lauren started crying, but I just felt relieved. And then I felt guilty for feeling relieved. Like, what kind of daughter is glad her parents are getting divorced? But the truth is, the house was calmer without him. My mom was happier without him. We were happier without him. What did hurt was realizing that even after the divorce, when he had no obligation to see us because he wasn't with my mom anymore, he didn't make any effort either. We had scheduled visits every other weekend, but like 60% of the time he'd cancel last minute. He always had an excuse. There was always something more important. Lauren stopped getting her hopes up after the third birthday in a row that he didn't show up for. I took a little longer. I guess part of me kept hoping that suddenly he'd realize what he was missing and change, but it never happened. About a year after the divorce, one day Lauren was checking my father's Facebook because, yeah, we were those stalker teenagers who stalk their parents on social media, and she discovered he'd gotten married. He'd married a woman named Jennifer and hadn't told us anything. Nothing. Not even a, "Hey girls, I'm getting married." We found out through Facebook photos, and you know what was the worst part? In the wedding photos were Jennifer's 2 daughters, Madison and Chloe. They were like 12 and 10 at the time. They were at the wedding. They were his bridesmaids or whatever. But us, his biological daughters, he didn't even invite. He didn't even tell us he was getting married. When Lauren showed me the photos, I just stared at the screen for I don't know how long, trying to process what I was seeing. My father in an elegant suit, smiling in a way I'd never seen him smile, with 2 girls who weren't us standing next to him like they were his daughters. And in that moment, something broke inside me. Literally, something shattered, because up to that point I had tried to justify it. Like, he's going through a hard time, or he doesn't know how to handle the divorce, or maybe he's depressed. But this had no possible justification. This was a conscious decision to replace us. I sent him a message that same day. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was something like, "Saw you got married. Congratulations, I guess. Would have been nice to hear it from you instead of from Facebook." He responded 2 days later with a super short text that said, "It was something intimate. I didn't think you'd care." That he didn't think I'd care that my father got married without telling me? Seriously? I wrote back something stronger. I'm not going to lie. I told him it was incredible that he'd invited his new wife's daughters but not his own, that it was obvious we didn't exist to him. He blocked me. My own father blocked me on WhatsApp. Lauren and I decided in that moment that enough was enough. We cut off all contact with him. We blocked him on all social media, changed our phone numbers, basically erased him from our lives. My mom didn't pressure us to keep him in our lives. I think she understood better than anyone how damaging it was for us to keep trying with someone who clearly didn't want to be in our lives. Those continued to be difficult years. I'm not going to lie. I had to go to therapy because I had a bunch of abandonment issues, obviously, and self-esteem and all that shit that comes from having a father who makes you feel like you're not enough. Lauren struggled with her own stuff too, though she was always better than me at processing things. Fast forward about 5 years. I was 22. I just finished college, which I paid for myself with student loans, and working part-time, by the way, because my father never offered help. And I met Kevin at a networking event for my job. Kevin is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Seriously. He's kind, attentive, he makes me laugh, he listens when I talk, he sees me. After a lifetime of feeling invisible to my father, finding someone who actually saw me was like, I don't know how to explain it, like being able to breathe for the first time. We dated for 3.5 years before he proposed to me, and when he did on a beach trip, he planned all by himself, super romantic and perfect. I obviously said yes. But then came the complicated part, the one I knew I was eventually going to have to face. Did I invite my father to the wedding or not? Kevin, who is the most understanding human being on the planet, told me he'd support me in whatever decision I made. My mom told me the same thing. Lauren, who had matured a ton and was now this wise, centered person I admired, told me, Mel, you have to do what's best for your peace of mind, not what you're supposed to do. And she was right. But it was still a super difficult decision because there's this social pressure, you know? This idea that your father should be at your wedding, that he should walk you down the aisle, that not having him there is somehow sad or incomplete. So I made a mistake. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. I don't know. After years of having him blocked, I unblocked him on Facebook. I just wanted to see how he was doing, like do my due diligence before making a decision about the wedding, and what I found destroyed me in a way I didn't expect. His profile was basically a shrine to his new family. Photo after photo of him with Jennifer, Madison, and Chloe. Vacations to Hawaii, to Disney World, to Europe, fancy dinners at expensive restaurants. Posts about how proud he was of Madison for getting into such and such university. Of Chloe for winning such and such competition. There was a photo of him teaching Madison to drive with a caption that said, "My princess is growing up so fast." And I almost threw up because never, not once in my life, had he called me his princess. And when I learned to drive, he sent me to classes with an instructor because he said he didn't have time. But wait, because it gets worse. I found a post from like 2 years back where he announced he was going to pay Madison and Chloe's full college tuition, that he wanted to make sure they had the best possible start in life without the burden of student loans. He never offered Lauren and me a single cent. When I asked him for help in my second year of college because I was struggling between working full-time and studying, he told me it was time I learned to be financially responsible. But he was paying his stepdaughters full college tuition without them even asking. And then, and this is what really broke me, I found a photo of Madison wearing my grandmother's necklace. The necklace that my paternal grandmother had promised me when I was 10 years old, had told me, "Someday this will be yours." My love, the necklace that was a family heirloom that had been passed down through generations, and my father had given it to Madison, to a girl who wasn't even his biological daughter, whom he'd met when she was 11. While I, my grandmother's biological granddaughter, didn't even know my grandmother had died until 3 months later, when a distant aunt casually mentioned it at a family event. I sent Lauren a message with screenshots and she called me crying. She'd seen the same thing and was as hurt as I was. Maybe more because she'd always been a little more hopeful than me, had always believed that maybe someday things would get better. But this was clear evidence that he hadn't just abandoned us, but had actively replaced us. And he'd done it well. He'd found 2 girls who were apparently easier to love than his own daughters. I was in a depressive spiral for like 2 weeks after that. Kevin was super worried. My mom too. Finally, my therapist suggested I write a letter. Not necessarily to send it, but to get out everything I was feeling. And that's what I did. I sat down one afternoon and wrote everything. I told him how much his abandonment had hurt us, how much it had hurt to find out about his wedding through Facebook, how much it hurt to see him giving his stepdaughters everything he'd denied us. I told him his mother had promised me that necklace, and that seeing it around Madison's neck felt like he'd ripped away the last piece of family I had left from his side. I asked him what we'd done wrong, why we weren't enough, why it was so easy for him to be the perfect father to them, but he could never even be a decent father to us. And you know what? After writing it, I decided to send it. Like, what else could I lose? I already didn't have a relationship with him. Everything that could be broken, it was already broken. So, I sent it by email, because I was still blocked on everything else. I waited for a response for days, then for weeks. And when a response finally came, it wasn't from him. It was from Jennifer. Jennifer's email was basically an attack. She said, I was an ungrateful child who didn't understand how difficult the divorce had been for Michael, that he'd tried to maintain a relationship with us, but that we were the ones who had rejected him, which was an absolute lie, that Madison and Chloe had been true daughters to him while we were just problematic. She said the necklace had been a gift from my grandmother to Madison before she died, another lie, and that I had no right to claim anything. She ended by telling me to leave her family alone and to get over my childish resentment. I didn't respond. What could I say? It was obvious my father hadn't even had the guts to read my letter himself, or if he read it, he didn't care enough to respond. He'd passed the responsibility to his wife, like he always passed the responsibility for everything related to us to someone else. About 2 months passed, and I was in full wedding planning mode when Lauren called me. Apparently my father had contacted her, I guess because I still had him blocked, asking about the wedding. Specifically, he asked if he was going to be invited. Lauren told him that was my decision and to talk to me directly. So he, very much in his style, asked Lauren to ask me if he could come. He didn't even have the courage to unblock me and ask me himself. He wanted my sister to be his messenger. Lauren told me all this and then added, Mel, I don't know what you want to do, but personally, I don't think he deserves to be there. Not after everything. And she was right. I knew it. But there was a part of me, that small, pathetic part that was still an 8-year-old girl desperate for her father's approval, that thought, what if this is my chance? What if I invite him and he finally sees what he's been missing and changes? But I talked to my therapist and she asked me a question that changed everything. How would you feel if you invite him and he ruins your special day? And I realized that the probability of him showing up and being the loving father I'd always wanted was almost zero, but the probability of him ruining my wedding somehow was pretty high. So I made the decision. I told Lauren to tell him no, that he wasn't invited, that my wedding was a day to celebrate with people who really loved me and who had been present in my life, and he didn't qualify. Lauren told me she was proud of me for setting boundaries. Kevin hugged me and told me we were going to have the best day of our lives, no matter who was or wasn't there. The wedding day arrived faster than I expected. I'd thought a lot about that moment of walking down the aisle. Like my whole life, I'd assumed it would be my father who would walk me down, but obviously that wasn't going to happen. I asked my mom to walk me, and she cried when I asked her, said it would be the honor of her life. And you know what? It was perfect. She looked beautiful in her dark green dress, and when she took my arm and we started walking toward the altar while the music played, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. There was no tension. No wondering if my father was going to show up drunk or late, or with Jennifer and the girls. None of that drama. Just pure, true love. The ceremony was beautiful. Kevin cried when he saw me. I cried when he said his vows. My mom and Lauren cried practically the whole time. Our friends and family were there celebrating with us for real. Not because they felt they should be, but because they genuinely wanted to be. The reception was amazing. We danced until our feet hurt. The food was delicious. Everything turned out exactly as we'd planned. And I didn't miss my father once that day. Literally, not once did I think, this would be better if he were here. If anything, I thought, this is perfect precisely because he's not here. But the story doesn't end there because obviously it couldn't end there. This is my life after all. On the wedding day, while I was at the reception enjoying myself with my new husband. I still get excited saying that word. My father called Lauren. She didn't answer at the time because she was busy being the best maid of honor in the world. But later, when she checked her phone, she had like 3 missed calls and a voicemail. In the message, he said something like, "Just wanted to say I'm proud of Melissa. I hope it was a beautiful day for her." Lauren told me about it days after the wedding, when we'd already returned from our honeymoon in Costa Rica, paid for by ourselves, obviously. She asked if I wanted to hear it, but I told her no. What difference did it make? Too little, too late. About 5 months passed after the wedding when my Aunt Maria, my father's sister who I still had some contact with, called me. She told me, my father had some health problems. She didn't tell me exactly what because she didn't know all the details either, but apparently it was something serious. She told me that Jennifer had mentioned that my father had been talking about us, about Lauren and me, and that he was sorry. My aunt suggested, very gently, that maybe it would be good if I called him. That life is short and you don't want to live with regrets. All that stuff. And honestly, I considered doing it. I sat with my phone in my hand for like an hour, looking at his number that my aunt had given me, thinking, do I do this? Do I call? But then I realized something important, something my therapist had been trying to teach me for years, but that I was finally truly understanding. I didn't need his regret to heal. I didn't need him to tell me, I'm sorry, to be able to close that chapter. He'd had 27 years to be my father. He'd had countless opportunities to choose me. And in every one of those opportunities, he chose not to. The fact that now, when he's sick and probably scared, he suddenly remembers he has 2 daughters, wasn't my emotional responsibility to carry. I thanked my aunt for calling, but told her I wasn't going to contact him. I told her I hoped he was okay, that I didn't wish harm on anyone, but that I no longer had space in my life for him. She understood, I think. Or maybe she didn't. But honestly, I don't care as much anymore what people think of my decisions regarding my father. Now, months later, I'm in a really good place. Kevin and I just moved to a new, bigger apartment because we're thinking about starting to try for kids soon. Lauren is engaged to an incredible guy she met last year. My mom is happy and healthy and is the best anticipatory grandmother in the world, even though she doesn't technically have grandchildren yet. I have a job I like, friends who support me, a chosen family that loves me unconditionally, and my father, from what I know through my aunt, is fine. He recovered from whatever he had. He's still with Jennifer and the girls. He's still the perfect father to them, I guess. And you know what? Good for them. Seriously. I hope Madison and Chloe never have to feel what Lauren and I felt. I hope he learned from his mistakes with us and is better with them. I don't wish them harm, but I also don't need to be part of that. I don't need his validation. I don't need his love. I don't need his regret. I already gave myself my own closure. I already decided that my worth isn't determined by a man who could never see how incredible Lauren and I were. I already built my own family, my own life, my own happiness. And it's a good life, a full life, a life that doesn't need to be completed by someone who was never willing to do the work of being present. Sometimes I still get sad. I'm not going to lie. There are moments, like when Kevin does something sweet and I think, this is what love is supposed to be. Or when I see fathers with their daughters, for at the park and I see that genuine connection, that I feel a small pang of pain for what I never had. But it's not that consuming pain it used to be anymore. It's more like an old scar that occasionally still bothers a little, but doesn't bleed anymore. Last week, my niece, my cousin's daughter, not technically my niece, but that's what I call her, asked me why I never talk about my dad. She's 7 years old and she's at that age where she asks a million questions about everything. I told her something simple, like, my dad and I don't have a relationship, but it's okay because I have a lot of people who love me. And she said, like your mom. And I said, exactly. Like my mom? And that was enough for her. She didn't need a long, complicated explanation about abandonment and trauma. She just needed to know I'm okay. And I am. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. And I didn't need my father to give me permission to be.